Hi everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. There's a new report out from a technology think tank that has looked at some of the state proposals for BEAD, and they're making recommendations that they should not maximize fiber at the expense of digital inclusion. I'll be right back, we'll take a look at that. Thanks for joining. Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. So I wanted to take a look at this report and comment on it. So this is the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, and they are a technology think tank. And they've come out with this report, which I've linked to this in the description. And you can view the report either on this webpage where you've got, you can click down here to get to various sections, or you can scroll down to the different sections. There's a map here that is their overall state grades as of May 13th when this came out, and you can, I guess you can click on that maybe here and it will open it up for you. Yeah, you can click on it and then you can, right here we're looking at overall, and then you can look at digital inclusion, their grades there I guess, and efficient spending, grades there, and tech neutrality. Net neutrality, tech neutrality, maybe that's what, oh no, that would be, I'm sorry. So we'll see this is very prominent in the report. That would be neutrality as far as the technology that they are considering. And that's really the focus of this report is they want more focus on digital inclusion, efficient spending, affordability, digital inclusion meaning affordability and digital equity, those kinds of things, as opposed to trying to maximize fiber. So we'll be taking a look at that. And I went ahead and you can also download, got a read report here that's probably the same thing, but I'll go back. I'm going to close this. Go back to here. So if you go up to the top, you can click downloads and then you can get the report there as well. So I did download that and highlighted some things that I wanted to cover because I don't necessarily agree with a lot of what they're saying. I mean, some of the things they say are things that need to be considered, but I don't necessarily agree with the overall conclusions of what they say states should be doing. I am all about this money being used as much as possible to provide broadband deployment and as much as possible to make fiber. And I realize states are not going to be able to do a lot of states are not going to be able to do fiber everywhere. There are some states that may be able to do fiber everywhere. And they may be able to do it without having hardly any money left for digital inclusion. But my recommendation would be that they do that, get fiber everywhere they can, and then use whatever they have left, if left over, for digital inclusion. If they don't have anything left over, that would be the next step. In my opinion, the first step is to get broadband deployment. If you try to do the digital inclusion stuff at the same time or not maximize the broadband deployment options, then I think you're getting the cart before the horse, or the surfing horse, the cart before the surfing horse, because, in some cases, I like to say that you can't, they say you can't lead a horse, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Well, you can lead people to the internet, but you can't make them get the internet or use the internet if they don't want the internet. And they might have internet on their phone and be happy with that. And not want to pay anything for wired internet. So I think you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them surf. What I'm saying there is you can't make people surf the internet. So I would say broadband deployment first, and then digital inclusion can come later, either from additional federal funds or state funds. But let's get everybody connected first, and let's get them connected with the broadband service that's going to be the most reliable and the most future-proof as much as possible. Because we don't want to have to go back to the well on broadband deployment. We don't want to be spending more money later because we've got areas that we could have covered with fiber that we didn't. So let's talk through this and look at it a little bit. So there's some key takeaways. I'll skip that because we're going to actually cover them. And then we've got their table of contents. So introduction, if all goes well, $42.5 billion program run by the NTIA should successfully fund complete broadband coverage across the United States. Much of the burden of that if rests on the shoulders of funding recipients. And those funding recipients would be the states that then are going to subgrant that to the final funding recipients, I guess, which would be the subgrantees, the internet service providers. So as of April 2024, every eligible state and territory has submitted both volumes to NTIA for approval and precipitated an iterative process of requests for edits and resubmissions. So there were two initial proposals that needed to be provided. You could provide them one at a time or both at the same time, but it basically separated what the states had to provide in the first from the second, so they could maybe get started with their challenge process a little sooner and get some things done before they finish the second part of the proposal. But all states have submitted both of those now. So far, most states have received approval from the NTIA in Volume 1 of their initial proposal and are therefore free to start their challenge process. So again, that was the reason for separating those out. And 4 states have had both their Volume 1 and 2 approved. States cannot proceed with their subgrantee selection and truly embark on the BEAD program until NTIA approves both volumes of their initial proposals. BEAD is the largest single program meant to address the digital divide, an ongoing problem whose causes today extend far beyond the infrastructure gaps. Non-adopters that do not subscribe to broadband most often cite reasons such as lack of interest or unaffordability. Unaffordability is something that needs to be addressed. Lack of interest can be addressed, but again, you can't make people use the internet if they are not really that interested. You can try to show them what they can do with it, but the main thing is to make sure they have access to it. That's the most important thing. Then we can worry about whether they're interested in using it. Mismanaged BEAD funding comes at the expense of both completing deployment and addressing all of the digital divide's root causes, and ultimately our ability to give every American the opportunity to get online. That's the most important thing, is giving everybody the opportunity to have good broadband at their home. So all states' initial proposals come out, or as states' initial proposals come out, the ITIF is rating them on their adherence to 3 major criteria that will ensure BEAD funding is used to the greatest possible benefit, with the aim of encouraging course correction by states that need it and highlighting those that are doing well. First, states should plan to rely on a range of technologies to maximize their broadband coverage, from fiber optic networks to low Earth orbit satellites, where the cost of a fixed connection is prohibitive. And I'm amazed that they mentioned satellite here. They even mentioned DSL should not be thrown out before states consider whether it's a problem. Second, states should create a streamlined regulatory environment that minimizes funds wasted on overcoming disjointed policies or inefficient regulations. That's good to do. Third, states should express a focus on and articulate a plan for digital inclusion within their BEAD plans. And I believe, if I remember, the NTIA did encourage that as well. There is a separate digital equity funding kinds of things, but I believe they would like that covered within the BEAD plans. This grading exercise is meant to alert those states whose current trajectories risk costing them program success down the line. It highlights specific states' missteps to explain why and how particular actions should be corrected. Similarly, it provides examples of a few exceptional state performance to encourage other states to mimic those behaviors. And I'm not going to look at the states, what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. Again, I linked to this in the description of the video, so you're welcome to read through that. I just wanted to cover some of their conclusions or what they're saying in various places that I don't agree with, and some things that I do agree with. Like I say here, it's important to make sure that you've got, that states are ready to be able to deploy broadband, to be able to limit challenges, like permitting, those kinds of things, and streamline all of that. Scoring criteria: states should practice true tech neutrality. And again, this is the technology. So though fiber optic networks are the most advanced technology available and perhaps preferable, ceteris paribus, I looked that up. I forget what it was. I looked it up the other day. Anyway, it's Latin, I can tell you that. With all other things, eliminating all other things that could be, it's something like that anyway. ITIF and many other groups have long argued that reliance on a mix of technology is the best and most feasible. Indeed, perhaps the only way to close the digital divide. And there's some truth there, because again, not all states are going to be able to deploy fiber everywhere. There's just going to be some really challenging areas, whether it's the geography, mountainous, those kinds of things, or just very few customers in areas. A combination, quite often, it's challenging geography plus very few customers. So yeah, they're going to have to use some other technologies in some places. But the question is, do they try to maximize fiber wherever they can with the BEAD money they're given, or do they try to leave some portion, and let's say a significant portion, left over for digital inclusion efforts such as affordability and making sure people know how to use the internet, making sure that there's no other kinds of issues that are keeping them from using the internet. So that's the question. They're saying they don't think they should try to maximize fiber, that they need to leave some money left over for that. Let's see. So from the general consumer's perspective, a fiber connection's performance is not materially different from that of, for example, a cable connection using DOCSIS 4.0, and that's true. For most customers, we have gigabit fiber everywhere. Not everywhere, sorry. We have gigabit fiber in lots of areas, and you could have a cable. Here in Atlanta, I've got gigabit fiber. That's what I'm using right now. But also Comcast is out here, and I don't know if they have DOCSIS 4.0 yet here, but they certainly can provide gigabit broadband download speeds to me. So for me, I really wouldn't notice probably much of a difference. There could be some differences in reliability, some other things, service, certainly, customer service. But that's certainly fast enough. Everyday use does not yet require fiber speeds. Again, I believe that's true. Most people don't need a gig download and certainly don't need anywhere near a gig upload. The question is more about the future there and whether the technology can support that in the future. I think that's the concern. And that's why we want to maximize fiber where we can, because fiber is basically glass that you can use, and just like coax, they've used different technologies with cable modem technology to increase the speeds. But it's going to be limited to a certain point because you've got RF issues. You're transmitting, basically over, RF waves over copper versus light waves over through fiber medium, through glass. So fiber is going to be a lot more reliable, and it's going to be a lot more expandable as far as speeds. I mean, they're already selling 25 gig symmetrical service. Nobody can afford it, and nobody needs it. Certainly not a consumer. But that's really the future. And even DOCSIS 4.0, while it's great for what it can do, it's not the future. And every cable company that's deploying it or other technologies in cable will tell you that. There's this thing where people think cable companies are against fiber. They're not. They have all kinds of fiber in their network already. They're trying to put more fiber in their network to make it more reliable, to go fiber deep. And they would love to get rid of their cable plant, their HFC, the coax portion of it, the C part of it, and put in fiber. But it's very expensive when you've already got good technology out there that today will serve the needs of people. So I think we can't say that we need to replace all of the cable modems that we have now with fiber. That we could never afford to do that. That's going to be up to the cable operators over time to do that as they upgrade their plants to be able to hold on to their customers as we start to need more speeds maybe than what DOCSIS 4.0 can provide. Everyday use does not require fiber speeds, and prioritizing meeting hypothetical future needs with limited funds comes at the expense of closing the digital divide today, especially since we are unlikely to see another allocation of funding as large as BEAD anytime soon, if at all. And that's the reason we need to maximize fiber, is exactly that sentence right there. That's why we should not be focusing on digital inclusion right now and affordability. We need to get everybody access to the best technology now, if at all possible, so that we don't have to go back to the well, because we're not likely to get a lot more, if any, funding for broadband. I mean, I think there'll still be additional programs, smaller programs. We've got USDA Reconnect out there, and if we, in the future, have really minimized the number of locations that aren't fiber now, let's say they're using some like a fixed wireless technology, maybe in the future when that's not going to be enough, then we can go back and provide funding for that. But we don't want to leave large areas like that open, and certainly not with satellite, as they mentioned in here. Anyway, I think they're wrong in their analysis here. In a country where some of the population is still entirely offline, it's irresponsible to push more expensive fiber coverage that is less likely to stretch to reach every community. I disagree. Wherever you can get fiber would be great, and if you've got a technology that today can be satisfactory, then you go. But there's a provision for that in the BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity. If it costs as much to bring fiber to a single remote home as it does to upgrade entire communities, networks, or to connect dozens of households, it is likewise irresponsible to choose the former when low Earth orbit satellite exists as a cost-effective solution. Well, I would agree to some extent there. Certainly we don't want to be if connecting one house costs the same as a community, then that is the extremely high cost threshold that's mentioned in BEAD. And then you can use other services that are not considered priority broadband. And a priority broadband project would be, for something to be a priority, I think it was priority broadband project, has to be fiber, cable, DOCSIS cable service. They even mentioned DSL, surprisingly, or fixed wireless. And the fixed wireless is supposed to be with all licensed spectrum or a combination of licensed and unlicensed. And then the NTIA came out and clarified that CBRS spectrum is licensed by rule, so that would apply as well. So those are 5G technologies that can provide faster speeds. But satellite is not mentioned. In fact, satellite is considered, it specifically says in the notice of funding opportunity, low Earth orbit satellite or any satellite is not reliable broadband service. So if you connect a location, you don't connect a location. If a location decides it's going to get satellite broadband, if that's the only thing available to them, I should say, then on the map they would still be considered unserved because it's not considered reliable broadband. Reliable broadband is not included with satellite. And actually, I think that's maybe the term I think of as reliable broadband would be DSL. It's got to be a certain speed. So if it's over 100 by 20 and it's DSL, then it's considered reliable broadband, and therefore it's considered served, which is unfortunate. And same with fixed wireless and cable and obviously fiber. Beyond maximizing, and I was wondering, did Elon Musk fund this? Because it's just very odd that they're including satellite, because there's no infrastructure to deploy. If you've got a single home out there that, okay, satellite will work for them, well, it's not like you're going to launch a satellite for them. The constellation's already up there. It's not like SpaceX needs to, it's not like Starlink. Starlink needs to launch more satellites in the constellation to serve that one home. So there's no infrastructure, additional infrastructure. It's already there. It's already floating over their home up low Earth orbit. So the most you could do would be to help with affordability. Now it's not cheap. I think I forget the base stations. I think if I remember, around $500 to get started, and then it's, if I recall, it's $100 or so per month. That's not cheap for that kind of speeds. You can get fiber. A lot of times, gig internet will cost you $70, $80 a month. But satellite, $100, and you're not going to get anywhere near the speeds of fiber. Now, it's very good. So if you don't have service, if you're at a house sitting on the top of a mountain and you don't have any service other than maybe dial-up or slow wireless or something like that, then you are very happy if you can get Starlink, because you could very easily get speeds over 100 megabits per second on the download, and on the upload, not too bad a lot of times as well, and good latency. Or less latency, I should say, than other satellite technologies. So it's certainly a good option, but how does that work into BEAD other than maybe helping somebody pay for it? Let's see. So beyond maximizing broadband coverage, states should ideally preserve some BEAD funds to help address the drivers of the digital divide beyond deployment. Each excess dollar put toward fiber, where another reliable technology could suffice, is a dollar less to spend on inclusion activities or addressing other barriers that customers face. And I would reverse that and say each dollar put towards these non-deployment things is $1 less for deployment. So I think the right strategy is to maximize fiber and then set your extremely high cost threshold level so that then you can cover with other technologies other than satellite. Fixed wireless is going to be the most likely candidate there. I don't think DSL is going to be the candidate there. If you've already got DSL going to a home, you can get fiber going to a home. So I don't think that makes sense. States should prioritize achieving universal coverage with technologies that meet current needs, or retaining funds to address inclusion activities such as affordability programs, digital navigation services, and digital literacy promotion. They say here, states should not label locations as unserved based solely on their covering technology. Well, the NTI already says that, again, if it's satellite is your only option, it's unserved. Even if it's over 100 by 20, it's considered unserved. It says here, among other possible adjustments, states are given the option to automatically mark as underserved locations covered by certain older technologies such as DSL, but coverage should be assessed by the performance of the connection, not the type of technology providing it. And I totally disagree with that. DSL is old technology. It's just not ever going to be anything that would it's going to be much less future-proof than cable technology and fixed wireless technology right now. So that's the worst of the technologies. And again, if you've got reasonable DSL service, then you are generally in an area where you're not that remote, because your service is going to be slow if you're far away from the central office or from a DSLAM. So if you've already got that wired technology out there, it's not, you should be able to get fiber there, I guess is my point. If DSL is largely incapable of reaching BEAD speeds, it will be excluded on the basis of those speeds in a properly conducted challenge process. I don't think they should waste the time or money considering DSL. It's just not the future. It's not even the present. People who have DSL today are not happy. People who have fixed wireless, if they've got good fixed wireless 5G service, they can be happy. If they've got good cable modem service, they can be happy. Generally, they're not happy on DSL and they want to get off it. Fixed wireless can offer speeds that often rival broadband's performance, but the reliability of its service is sometimes questionable. And some states similarly look to exclude it on that basis. A challenge process based on speed and performance metrics will highlight those areas where existing networks, regardless of technology, offer inadequate service. And I feel kind of the same about fixed wireless, in that they should not spend time, if they don't want to include, for example, fixed wireless from the major carriers like T-Mobile and Verizon, AT&T, the reason they're doing that is because they know that those services, basically everybody can get them. What that can provide you, if you exclude that, and you can get, let's say, fiber to most of those areas, then you've got competition, which can bring down prices. So you've got fiber service, and then you've got a fixed wireless service, let's say from a national provider like T-Mobile or Verizon or AT&T, and it's 5G. So then you've got competition. But the problem with these national carriers is that their bread and butter is their mobile service, and spectrum is a limited resource. So here, T-Mobile was offering fixed wireless at my address for a while, their 5G service that could compete, let's say, with a wired service, but they stopped doing that because they sold, I guess, enough customers where they don't want to offer that now. And that is a concern that you would have, where if you don't take these folks off of the map, if you say, okay, all these areas are covered by T-Mobile or Verizon or AT&T or one or all three of them, who knows, then you're basically locking out the funding that could go to provide a wired service. And then again, they could say, well, we just don't have enough spectrum right now to connect everybody. So that is why I think some of those states are doing that. They should hit most, their primary goal should be to get good wired broadband to as many people as possible, preferably fiber. And really there's no other options. If they can get wired broadband somewhere that's not already there, fiber is the way to go. And if not, I think fixed wireless is your backup plan. State objectives should prioritize coverage reaching 100 by 20 down and up, and a range of technologies. Well, that's part of what they need to be doing. Yeah, they need to find technologies that are over that. Range of technologies, again, only if needed. States that go beyond that to push faster speeds, such as 100 meg symmetrical, both up and down, or even 1 gig symmetrical, are preferencing faster speeds at the expense of other potential uses for BEAD funds. Totally disagree with that, because it's all about fiber. If you can get fiber there, 100 by 100 is nothing. And even a gig these days, a gig symmetrical is nothing. I mean, you've got XGS-PON, which is getting prevalent now. It's 10 gig symmetrical. And again, people don't need that, but it's because it's fiber. So you change out the cards and maybe the lasers, or what lasers are doing, and you can go from a gig up to 10 gig, up to 25 gig, and even further in the future over the same medium. So you don't need to lay more fiber. Well, if you're going to say, well, we're okay with 100 by 20 because that's good for now, we want to save some of this money for digital inclusion, well, then you're stuck with 100 by 20. If that's, let's say, a DSL, somebody that's on DSL and they're close to that central office or whatever, so they can barely get that, well, then you're locking them in. Or if it's fixed wireless, and yeah, they can get 100 by 20 now. If it's satellite, and it's 150 by 37, so they can get that now. Then you're going to have to go back later and bring fiber in. So this doesn't make any sense at all to me. It says, similarly, states that plan to prioritize fiber networks or express reluctance to rely on technologies such as low Earth orbit satellites or fixed wireless where necessary, are failing to use every tool available to them. Well, again, they have to make a decision where their extremely high cost threshold is, and then they can determine, they determine how much money they have. And by the way, a lot of states are not going to make that determination until they do their first rounds of bids and see what comes back. So then they determine, all right, what areas do we have left? How much money do we have? And where do we need to use another technology? That is the approach they're supposed to use, not how much money can we save for other programs. I really don't think they need to be doing that. That needs to be step number 2. And that can be with other funding. They could use other state funding for that, or maybe the government can come out and the federal government come out and do some digital inclusion and affordability programs later. The other thing is service providers really should be taking on some of the affordability things, and then also certainly training, those kinds of things. So if I were a service provider and I were going to go in an area where I have a number of people that just don't know how to use the internet, then one of the first things I'd be doing would be trying to help them use the internet, because I want to get as many subscribers as I can on that service that want to use it. So states' proposed subgrantee selection process should neither preference nor discourage any particular provider type. I would agree with that. Anybody who can do the job, assuming that they've got the experience, should be able to do it. Now, if you get somebody that comes in and says, we've been doing fixed wireless and we're going to do fiber now, you want to make sure that they have the technology expertise and the people that can come in and make that transition. A lot of times fiber operators do know fiber because they're maybe doing some backhaul kinds of things, just like cable operators. Cable operators can do fiber. They're doing it now in their cable plants, so they can certainly do that. But then you've got municipalities and electric co-ops. A lot of electric co-ops are doing fiber to connect up their substations, so they know it somewhat, and they have partners they can work with that can help them. So yeah, you shouldn't exclude anybody as long as they're experienced and financially stable. That's important. Though NTIA guidelines allow states to reject or preference certain providers, for example, government-owned or municipal broadband providers, as long as their preferences are expressed neutrally and in advance, states that choose this option are artificially limiting their universe of possible subgrantees and potentially discouraging strong contenders. I think what they're saying is, the NTI is definitely, again, they're trying to, by doing that, by saying, government, cities providing internet and electric co-ops, again, not-for-profits providing internet, what that can do is help reduce the cost because there's not a profit motive. They still have to cover their costs, but they don't need that, and they have to cover their costs, plus they have to have enough money to maintain the plant, to grow the plant. So it's in a way, it's not even break even from that standpoint. I guess it is break even. There's not owners or stockholders that you need to pay a profit on top of that, but they still have to have a profit so that they can roll money back into the business to make it grow. So it's not completely not for profit, if you want to look at it that way. Either way you go, the city doesn't want to lose money. They want to maintain the infrastructure. The electric co-op doesn't want to lose money. They want to make sure that their members are not having to pay more money than they need to to keep the infrastructure going. So, but it's true that I think cities, electric co-ops, independent telephone companies, independent cable companies, independent internet operators, maybe that start a fiber business that, again, have the financial ability to do so and have the technical expertise that they bring in, even they should be considered. So I would agree with that statement partially. States should set and use the extremely high cost per location threshold in such a way that it maximizes high quality coverage, not fiber coverage. Totally disagree, and I believe the NTIA would agree with that. I think what they want, I think the whole point of the extremely high cost threshold is that you set a threshold where you can consider other technologies other than fiber as long as they are reliable broadband, I believe. I'm trying to remember if you could consider something that's not reliable like satellite as part of the NTIA. I think maybe the NTIA did come out and say, yeah, if you had to, you could. But that's not the goal. I think the goal is to maximize fiber as far as the NTIA is concerned. It says the NTIA's general mandate is to achieve universal coverage while maximizing fiber coverage. I just repeated what I just said, sorry. States have some room to impose their own priorities. For example, NTIA officially deems end-to-end fiber priority broadband. That's what priority broadband is. It's end-to-end fiber. that automatically beat out non-priority applicants proposing to use other technologies, but states can either request waivers from NTIA to select more economical proposals in certain areas instead, or set an extremely high cost per location threshold that limits fiber networks to where they are financially feasible. And again, that's just the nature of it. There's going to be some areas that are not financially feasible. And if you tried to cover them with fiber, then you wouldn't have enough money to cover everybody else. And that's the point. It's not about affordability or digital inclusion. It's about, do you have enough money left to cover everybody with some kind of reliable broadband? That's the goal. That's the primary goal, is to get all unserved locations and then underserved locations covered with a reliable broadband product. Most states plan to calculate their extremely high cost threshold once the data from subgrantee applications is available and not before, but they should plan to arrive at a number that allows the most economical coverage with reliable and adequate technologies for their entire population. Even a state that achieves universal coverage has not necessarily succeeded if it leaves no funds for inclusion activities, and their extremely high cost per location threshold is an important tool to enable that. Again, I disagree. That tool is meant to see how much they can maximize fiber and then cover the rest of their territory with some other reliable broadband technology. States should create a regulatory programmatic environment that fosters efficiency. This is perhaps no greater potential area for wasted BEAD funds than in inefficient or outdated regulations that divert resources from broadband build-out. I think what they're talking about through this whole thing is diverting resources from broadband build-out. You should not do that. They're talking about something else here. I'm talking about saving money for other kinds of things. It should all, as much of it should go to broadband deployment of fiber as possible, and then all broadband deployment, if needed, from other technologies. Disputes over access to critical infrastructure, such as pole attachments, can double the time and resources necessary to complete a broadband project. That sentence is correct. So this is the part that, yes, they should be focusing on. If that's going to increase the costs of deploying broadband, you don't want that, because that means you've got less money for deploying broadband. And if it's going to increase the amount of time it takes to do that, if it's going to decrease the number of subgrantees that want to even bother with it, those are all bad. So yes, you should take care of these permitting things and other challenges. States should allow area and multiple dwelling unit challenges to streamline the initial challenge process and arrive at the most accurate maps. Area challenges, which are triggered when a certain number of challenges are submitted regarding a specific quality of a provider's stated coverage, for example, availability, latency, or speed, put the initial responsibility of proving the quality and extent of the coverage on the challenged provider rather than the challenger. Similarly, MDU challenges establish this burden of proof if a certain percentage of units within a single multi-dwelling unit challenge one of these metrics. I'm not sure exactly what they're saying there. I think one point to be made is that it is important that if we're seeing lots of challenges in an area, let's say an area says that there's DSL service and it's 100 by 20, and a lot of people are challenging that and saying, hey, we have it, it's not 100 by 20. And that's certainly possible. And what's going on there is you've got that underserved threshold of 100 by 20 with a technology that can meet that or exceed that depending on where you're located, and in a lot of cases can't. So it might say 100 by 20 throughout that whole area when a lot of people can't get it. And in those kinds of cases, if there's lots of challenges, then yeah, that should be looked at and removed from the map as served or underserved, because it's just not true. States should waive all existing, and by the way, that's going to happen when you're at these thresholds. So if there's a cable operator and they're saying, in this area we're offering 500 by 100 service, and people are saying, I'm not getting 500 by 100, I'm getting 350 by 75. Well, it's less important, okay? It's over the threshold. And it could be the speed test that's bad. It could be that the cable operator is too congested and maybe they're not able to provide those speeds even though their technology can support it. It could be a number of things. But it's less important than those people that are hanging around the threshold of 100 by 20 or 25 by 3. States should waive all existing state laws that preference or disadvantage municipal providers. Though this is a direct requirement of NTIA, it bears repeating, no particular type of provider should be preferred or prohibited from applying to the BEAD programs. that's true. And again, I don't think municipals or electric co-ops should be preferenced. They should also not be eliminated from the process and are not supposed to be. A successful BEAD application process will be open to every realistic contender and then judge them on the merits on a truly level playing field. I would agree with that. States should take a consistent, proactive approach to readying communities for broadband deployment. Streamlining likely regulatory barriers to BEAD implementation includes employing policies such as dig once mandates. That means, for example, if you're going to build a new road somewhere, go ahead and put in the conduit, probably maybe not the dark fiber, but at least put in the conduit so that you can run the fiber through there without having to dig again in the future. So that's important and definitely a good idea. Promoting the use of existing infrastructure and improving permitting and access to infrastructure. For example, pole attachments. Again, that's very important and rights of way. That's very important to keep those processes streamlined. NTIA simply requires that states indicate which barriers they have addressed and how they have done so. The strongest state should make every attempt to comprehensively address each of these potential barriers. And I think a lot of states are doing that. Mentions here, many states have published and disseminated best practices for communities to adhere to. Some states have gone further. Colorado's Broadband Office, for example, employs a Broadband Ready Community program designed to address the specific barriers found to be most prevalent in its states. And a lot of states are doing that Broadband Ready Community where the communities have to say, yeah, we're going to make sure that we don't take too long on permits, that we reduce the amount of red tape, and then that will help with these things. So that's a good point. States should build strong collaborative structures to govern their broadband approach. The most successful states will view BEAD implementation not as a one-time project, but as an opportunity to design systems of governance for their broadband performance. Further, as the world becomes more digital, broadband access has an increasing effect on other areas of state concern, such as the economy, education, healthcare, and general society. Yeah. Nevada, for example, has for years now been establishing broadband action teams in each of its counties. These BATs generally consist of a range of community leaders and delegates representing diverse interests. They also participate directly in the state broadband office's BEAD planning process. So, yeah, it makes sense that we've got broadband offices now that their main focus is figuring out, okay, what are we going to do with all this money? How are we going to spend it? Hopefully, how are we going to spend it efficiently? And there's different, obviously, as we see here, there's different opinions on what these folks believe and what I believe, but how are they going to spend it efficiently? So yeah, that's important. And maintaining those offices afterward, obviously you wouldn't need as many people and there wouldn't be as much going on, but you still want to have a focus on broadband in the state. States should address digital inclusion within BEAD. The value of funding BEAD deployment economically is that states can use their leftover funds for digital inclusion efforts. Bolstering potential adoption rates, such as by providing affordability programs to consumers or increasing consumer interest in a broadband subscription, can help support an ISP's business case to build a network. Long-term, ISPs need consistent service uptake to be able to serve an area, and populations will only benefit if they can actually use and afford the networks that are built to their homes. Put another way, much of the digital divide needs to be solved with something other than or in addition to more deployment. That is counterintuitive because the digital divide is still there. If you don't have good broadband service there, then there's a digital divide. So you could have a community where you have some number of people that can't afford it, but a lot of people that say you can, but of those people who can, they can't get good broadband because you focused on affordability. Or it could be that you've got a community, where you've got maybe some older folks that don't use it as much, don't think they need it, or younger folks who say, mobile broadband is fine for me. And if you wind up not deploying broadband for those who really want a good future-proof wired connection that's going to, continue to be viable for 30, 40, 50 years to come and longer, who knows, fiber, what you can get with it, versus something that may be only viable for 10 years, then that doesn't make sense to me. That's counterintuitive. So I think you focus first on getting the best possible broadband everywhere, and then if there's money left over, then you do the digital inclusion and affordability stuff, or you have to then fund that later through some other source. At NTIA's last count, lack of interest in internet connection and affordability concerns explained over 75% of the offline population. And I don't think they're completely offline. A lot of them, again, are probably using their mobile device, and they may be happy with that, happy enough to not spend the money. During COVID, we saw where a lot of people were like, wow, I really need a wired connection. And that's when we determined there a lot of areas did not have good wired connections. Well, once the BEAD funding is provided for broadband deployment, then if that happens again, people will at least have an option to get that broadband. And then, the question is affordability. That's always there. Under 4% of the population cited lack of infrastructure availability as their reason for remaining offline. Again, they're just not into broadband. They're just not into you, kind of thing. BEAD is the largest broadband funding program, and the entirety of the largest funding program should not be spent on a relatively smaller reason for digital exclusion, simply because addressing that reason can be very expensive. Again, the point of BEAD, I think, it's broadband equity, access, and deployment. There's an equity thing in there, but that equity, in my opinion, is more about, does everybody have access to good broadband, not affordability, and not do they not know how to use it? In my opinion, the ISP should be doing the training. If they go in an area, it's like, hey, I've got a certain number of the larger population than normal that don't want it, don't know why they need it. I'm going to try to convince them. That's part of that the ISP should be doing. On affordability, we've got the Affordable Connectivity Program that's winding down this month. And I know that's a controversial topic, but I would say that too much money was spent on that to people that really didn't need it, because you could take that $30 subsidy or $75 on tribal lands and you could apply it to any package. So if it was an $80 gig product, you could take that $30 subsidy and then you could pay $50 a month and get a gig instead of $80 a month. Well, that person I don't think really needs the ACP. So we ran through the money pretty quickly. It was $14 billion, and we went through it in 2.5, 3 years, something like that. I can't recall. But right now, with the number of people that were on it, now that it's going to be winding down, I think it's 23 million, that would only last about 2 years, probably less, when you figure that more people would be signing up if we did implement it again. Plus, if they continued on with what they were planning, which was instead of $30, it would be $75 in rural areas, it would last even less. So it might last a year to a year and a half at most. And that's $14 billion. And we forget how much that is. So, you hear $1 million, you hear $1 billion, you hear $1 trillion. It doesn't, it's a lot of money, but it doesn't sound like that much more money. So it's $1 million. Okay, it's $1 billion. All right, well, it's not $1 billion, it's $1 trillion. That's a lot of money. Well, $1 billion, again, this was 14 billion, the original ACP. $1 billion is $1,000 million. That's $1 million 1,000 times is what $1 billion is. $1 trillion is $1 million. So it's $1 million 1 million times. That gives you an idea of how much money and how big that number actually is. So the U.S. Deficit, this is how much the budget deficit is this year. This is how much more we're spending than we have. So we don't have $14 billion. We're spending way more than we have. So the budget deficit is about $850 billion, I think. So that's, what is that? That's $855 million, no, $1,000 million, $855,000 million, if you want to look at it that way. That's money that we spent that we don't have. And as far as over time, the money that we've spent that we don't have, the U.S. debt is about $34 trillion. That's how much we've spent over the years that we don't have. We're having to pay interest on that, and that's a huge amount of interest that we have to pay just to maintain that debt. So that's $34 trillion. So that would be $34 million, if I've got that right. That's a lot of money. So you can see why we need to be, the money that we're using needs to go to broadband deployment, so we don't need to come back and be spending multi-billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars more to do broadband deployment. And let's figure out how we can do affordability better, maybe different ways by having the consumers that can afford broadband and some other services pay for those who can't. And let's limit it to those who actually truly need it, so that we can not run through that money so quickly. That's really, I think, the issue that we had there. Let's see, anything else in here? There's a couple other things. I'm not going to go through the rest of this. Just states should account for a community impact in their BEAD subgrantee selection process. Talks about that. And states should articulate a thoughtful approach to non-deployment activities and should intend to address digital inclusion within BEAD. Again, I would say the primary thing for BEAD is deployment. States should show evidence of collaboration and overlap between their BEAD and digital equity plans. I believe that NTI is recommending that, again, they do address digital inclusion if they can in their BEAD funding, and then also make sure they're not overlapping and they have coordination between their digital equity plans and their BEAD plans. So that's all there. Let's see what else. States should ensure accessibility and implement programs at the most local levels to maximize diverse participation. Again, the NTIA has really been stressing local participation, and I think states have been doing that because it's in the notice of funding opportunity and it's something they have to put in their plans. So all of that should be in place. And then there's a conclusion here. So I'll let you read through the rest of that. I appreciate your joining me today on kind of a long one, but I wanted to go through this and just talk a little bit about what I feel is not right in there. Again, I think our primary goal with BEAD is to get the best possible broadband to every location possible. And the number of locations, thankfully, are going down because we've got other money going toward that from USDA Reconnect and from ARPA. And there are some RDOF funding that actually is getting built. Some of it is being pulled back. But we're seeing the numbers go down, which is good. We've also got just private investment out there. Some operators are out there trying to get fiber, for example, in areas where they say they can make a case on their own because they want to get that out there before somebody gets funded. They might think, well, we could get funded, but we might not. So there's some private building going on out there as well. A lot of that's slacked off because I think a lot of the operators are waiting to see if they're going to get funding. But anyway, so the number of unserved and underserved locations is going down. So I still am confident that we can cover we can use all of these funds and get everybody access to at least fiber in the vast majority of areas of their state. Depending on the state, it's going to vary. In some states, it's going to be all fiber. In some states, it's going to be maybe hardly a little bit over 50%, and they might have to do fixed wireless in other areas. It's going to depend on the state. But I really feel like we can get everybody covered. And then we can look at all of these other issues that we need to address separately. Okay, let's take the most important thing first, and then let's look at the other things. Thanks for joining me. If this was interesting, if you give me a like on the video, if this is something you weren't aware of, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. Subscribe, click the bell to be notified when I'm live, and I will see you next time for Broadband Deployment News. Take care. Bye-bye.